Well, welcome everyone to the RevOps Recruiters podcast.
Yeah, here we are. It's starting to feel like spring, which is exciting. I like that the weather's getting a little bit warmer. The days are getting longer, so that's fun. I'm enjoying that.
And happy Valentine's Day.
Yeah, although by the time you hear this, it'll probably be 3 weeks afterwards. But happy belated Valentine's Day. So, yeah, well, this is the RevOps Recruiter podcast. As you said, we've got David and Adam from RevSearch, and today we've got a great guest with us that we're excited to have join us. So, David, why don't you intro our guest a little bit?
Awesome. Welcome, Scott, to the RevOps Recruiters podcast. We have Scott McKenzie from Bain Capital. He's an operating partner there. Scott's got a strong background in consulting. He's been in-house helping companies grow, and he is on the private equity side helping increase valuation, partnering with companies. So, Scott, I'm going to hand it back over to you. Give us a little bit of background on yourself.
It's great to be here. So I'm Scott McKenzie. Here at the Bain Capital Tech Opportunities Fund, which is a growth equity fund focused on enterprise software investing. We have a partnership model that involves working closely with the folks that we partner with to try to maximize their potential and hopefully sort of be as helpful as we can while not getting in the way. My story is, quickly did management consulting out of school, transitioned into growth equity as an investor, working for a private equity fund called JMI Equity. Subsequently found and fell in love with the portfolio operations function, which is really about partnering with management teams to help achieve sort of the business objectives. We always do underwritten plans for what do we think is possible with these businesses, and that ends up being the rallying cry to try to hit and beat, to steal a public company reference. And so for me, fell in love with that construct, and ultimately actually joined one of the portfolio companies that JMI was invested in, an automotive SaaS business called Automotive Mastermind, where I was fortunate to be a part of the journey upwards on kind of the hyper growth rocket ship.
Yeah.
That was, figuring out the infrastructure of the business, how do new functions, how do they get incubated, how do they mature over time, how do we solve problems as we continue to try to drive the bus forward in the midst of, pretty amazing growth. That business, we were fortunate enough to sell the business to IHS Markit. And let's call it a year or a year and a half after that, joined to help start this growth equity fund within the Bain Capital umbrella, and am fortunate to partner with a bunch of businesses today who are led by folks much smarter than I am. And we can talk a little bit about how operations and intelligence has changed over time, and I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for the background there. Looking forward to this conversation. We've worked with you on helping to place RevOps leaders in some of the portfolio companies that you've worked with, which is always exciting. And I love it when we get to have a conversation with someone from the PE side who is probably observing the different progressions of companies that are just getting started in that operational kind of bringing everything together, all the way to the ones that are really excelling in that and seeing that hyper growth. And so having this conversation will be a fun one. David, you want to kind of cue up that first question that we've got here?
Yeah, kind of continuing that conversation around go-to-market intelligence. It really, it requires a system. Oftentimes we partner with companies that have disjointed processes, disjointed systems, right? Lack integration. And so there's that lack of, the need to synthesize, the need to harmonize, right? And standardize. So let's start the conversation here. When we're thinking about siloed functional data, that shift into full go-to-market intelligence, what does that progression look like, and why does it matter? Start there.
Look, my framework, of course, is from a software perspective.
Yeah.
So there are certainly other ways businesses evolve, but sort of as I see the evolution of software companies, what happens practically is, early on, your product, your market, you're just trying to convince customers that what you have is valuable. And, to a certain extent, the data supporting, whether a customer is happy or not, or whether you're getting in good leads, innately, whether a customer says yes or not, who all your customers are in many cases.
You're close to
And
it,
then,
right?
That's right. That's right.
Living and dying by it.
Yeah, exactly.
Say it again.
Living and dying by that, right?
That's right. That's right. If you don't know the answers to those questions, you probably won't be in business for very long. And so then as it evolves, right, it's you start to prove product market fit to some extent. You can't know every single customer. You have more questions about how things are trending. And that's where, the importance of data and analytics starts. And usually at some point, there's a critical moment where you say, okay, I've got all this information. I don't know how to explain it. I need to hire somebody to help me interpret that data. And that is the sales ops analyst. That is a product ops specialist. That is someone who sits and is just generally an analyst, in the finance function. They can be anywhere across the business. But what happens is, you start from a place of one functional leader needs an analyst to support them. And then everybody needs an analyst to support them because intelligence is important. And if you don't have the ability to have the dashboards and metrics and intelligence to make decisions, you're going to do a bad job over the course of time. And so, well, that's great because you now have the ability to make better decisions informed by data. Problem is that very quickly you end up with a bunch of functional fiefdoms that are providing different sources of data intelligence to functional leaders. And so then you have functional leaders having discussions about what operational decisions to make that are informed by entirely different underlying assumptions.
Yeah, and they may be different sets of data, not even be saying the same thing.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so there's this point where the CEO or founder gets frustrated because they say, like, what the heck? Like, I don't know who in my executive team I'm even supposed to believe because I'm looking at these dashboards. I don't know if they're right. I don't know, if Sue is right or Fred, and I don't know what underlying data sets where everything's coming from, the source of truth construct. So a lot of times that's where, for us, what we've seen maybe more in this growth stage of investing is you move from this functional fiefdom to a centralized operational intelligence model. And that can either be in a sort of more traditional BizOps title, it can sit under FP&A, it can be strategy and operations, or it can be RevOps. And really, it's all about how do you create the functional hub and spoke model where you've got a centralized understanding of all the sources of data coming in and then how they all fit together. So you can still have a stakeholder model where the CRO has their person that they are leveraging to get the data they need to make decisions, but it's all coming from a shared set of underlying assumptions and data sources. And so I give that whole wind up to sort of say that what this transition allows for is better decision making at the executive level. And without that better business decision making, you will ultimately run into a wall. You may not think it's going to happen to you today, tomorrow, next month. You don't know when the wall's coming, but it's coming for you, and it'll hit unless you're able to stay ahead of it.
Yeah. I mean, it makes me think about when you're thinking about a business that's still in the entrepreneurial stage, right? You described it earlier, where the founders, they know everything about every customer. And so they have all the data at that point. And they've got a business at that point that's relevant enough that it begins to grow. And that's when I think initially it starts to break down, where you don't have that full picture of the customer experience, the customer journey, the data that relates to that. And so it creates these little, like you said, fiefdoms of data that exist across each of those different go-to-market functions, but they're segmented, they're separated. It's not holistic. And if you don't make that progression back to, not that you know every single customer, but you can see the picture being painted of what the customer journey looks like holistically, so that you can, like you said, make better decisions on where the company should go, places where the company needs to redirect, make a change, have input, whatever that looks like. And so it's almost like you're going back to that understanding. It's based on data, not firsthand experience with every customer, but based on data, you once again understand the entire customer journey and know how to apply the right pressure and at the right points.
Yeah, that's really good. I also, just to kind of continue that thought, when you're scaling and adding headcount, right, to an organization, you've got this small group. I think about our business, right? We've got a small group. We know what's going on. The moment you start adding folks to the team, you start really ramping up, things start breaking, right? You know what's in your head, but how do other folks know what's going on in the business? And so, this need for scale is so, having that operations foundation is so critical to actually ramp up and scale, even on the head, specifically to headcount.
There's this cadence of a communication point that I think we'll get to, but there's also this sprawl point that often it gets lost. For those thinking from like a CFO, board and CEO perspective, it's a lot of times hard to understand how many dollars are being invested in analytical resources, because they can be pocketed in to various functional P&Ls. And what's really a funny and valuable knock-on effect of centralizing your operations and analytics functions or intelligence is that it's like, here are the millions of dollars we're spending on analytics.
Yeah.
You'll say, that's crazy. We are spending $20 million. A business I work with that has, I think, 90 people in business operations today. And
wow.
I think I've had 4 or 5 conversations of, how in the world is it that big? That's crazy. And the answer is, well, I would argue if you looked at a comparable business of this size, you might find that many folks and more doing analytics, ops, intelligence, function, jobs. It's just they sort of sit in different areas. They sit somewhere as an analyst in the finance function. They are the sales assistant. There are 12 interns that work for the strategy team. There's all these folks who ultimately could get allocated out to their functional P&Ls, and probably should from a reporting standpoint. But you should be really honest with yourself about how much you're investing in intelligence, because if you aren't intentional about it, it'll just happen to you, and you won't. And one way or another, you're going to be spending the money. You might as well know what you're spending.
Yeah, I mean, it happens on tech as well, right? We hear it all the time. In fact, I think most of the folks that we're putting in organizations, we hear it more often than not that they're saying, come in and actually reduce the tech stack, not increase it. Because what they find is that over time, because they weren't aware, they weren't intentional, they started buying up all these little pieces of tech. And then there's redundancy everywhere. There's tools that aren't really being utilized. And like you said, they're on different separate P&Ls across the go-to-market different functions. And next thing you know, you're spending all this money and there's not been the intentionality of really building a holistic tech stack. And the same thing applies to resources, the individuals, the people, right, that are inside that organization that are just kind of strewn across all these different teams, but not centralized.
Yeah, so I had a conversation with a candidate, made me think of it just now. And one of the first things, because we talk a lot of impact, right? We walk through impact stories with candidates and just try to understand, what's the biggest impact you made on this organization, and in the first 30, 60, 90 days, right, when you just come in. And we got on this topic of quick wins and looking at a tech stack. I mean, there are so many quick wins. And specifically, this candidate was saying, look, we had a certain system. I don't remember exactly what tool or piece of tech it was, but just overbought way too much for that size of business, right? Spending way too much money, and it's not even being utilized, right? And so what RevOps can do, RevOps comes in and looks at exactly that. What do we need for this stage of growth? What do we actually need, right? And cutting things down and trimming and making things more lean. I think that's a huge value of this function, and creating those aha moments, right? It's like we're saving, I don't know, $500,000 in tech cost, and we can run the tech stack more efficiently this way. I mean, those are big wins. So that made me think of that just now.
There's a situation, even if you want to simplify it, where it's become RevOps. It used to be sales ops and marketing ops, right? And there's a reason why it became RevOps. It's because there were a lot of shared systems that were operating in silos that didn't have good handoffs or connectivity points, and it was not only not optimal, it just didn't work anymore, which is why the function has merged in a way. And my personal view is that I think it applies less directly, but equally as important to all of the different functional areas, because there are other overlaps in product, engineering, finance, sales, marketing, customer success, that all require operational data sets that need to be woven together to tell a business story. And if you don't have a single view of all of those components, you got different people operating at different altitudes. You miss the why behind some sales metric, and you don't understand that it's actually a product problem that you could have seen over here. But because no one is looking at the connected story, you lose the thread and you lose the narrative.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Let's transition, because you've already alluded to this earlier, and so I'd like to get into this idea of when we were having a conversation before. You were talking about the CEO operating system, and it's not that that's something that you can go and Google and buy, right? It's not that, but you were just saying it's important that as a CEO you have some operating system that you run your business based on. And so I'd love for you to unpack a little bit more of what you mean by that. And again, why it's so important, why it's critical.
Yeah. So ultimately, the CEO's job is to, guide the business as the captain, not let the business ultimately guide them. And if you aren't really intentional about what information you're going to receive at what cadence, and how you're going to make decisions with what group of people, you're going to find decisions being made for you in your business. And so it's really establishing a clear set of expectations, and that's a cadence of meetings with what group at what frequency, talking about what issues. That's your being more specific. That's who's on your executive team. How often do we meet? What do we talk about? How do topics get raised? Okay, how then do those discussions cascade up, into board discussions and down into extended leadership meetings, all hands discussions, regular communications with customers. And there needs to be an intentionality to it, or otherwise you end up with a situation where either you are making decisions with only part of the information, or alternatively, you are not actually giving, or everybody else in the org may actually not know what the decisions are that have been made. And so for me, it's ultimately about setting the tone for how a CEO is going to lead. It's running the business while also transforming the business, and how are you going to be intentional about both of those things. One story for me, had a founder come to me. We had just the founder had just acquired their biggest competitor, and overnight he'd gone from running the largest business he'd ever run to running a business 2 times the size of any business he'd ever run.
Yeah.
And he said, "Look, I was already underwater. Like, how the heck am I going to do this? And I'm going to do it one way or the other, but like, I'd love to be thoughtful about this."
Sure.
And that was really where this type of thing comes in. It says, okay, like, let's be thoughtful about who are the people you're talking to regularly, what information you're receiving, when. How do you make sure that the meeting that you just had monthly to talk about the financial results with your board, how do you not waste those 32 slides when you talk to your exec team, and when you talk to your extended leadership team, and when you talk to the company? Like, can we make 28 of those slides, off the shelf? And yes, you'll have to have the conversation 3 times for 3 different audiences, but at least you won't have to prepare brand new materials each time, and you get into, you're a materials factory instead of a, decision-making factory. And so for me, it's like, those are the types of things that CEOs and founders, you're dealing with chaos all the time in a growth, in a growth setting. And so it's like, how do you pause and spend the time to figure out how you're going to fly your plane? Right? Yeah. And so that's why we call it the CEO's operating system.
Yeah. I mean, the reality is I don't think it matters what size your organization is. If you aren't intentional about having a systematic system in place that allows you to, like you said, I love make decisions and communicate clearly. If you don't have something in place that allows you to do that, things are going to fall apart and things are going to break apart. David and I are much smaller company, but we're right now going through and implementing what's called EOS, Entrepreneur's Operating System, right? And it's around cadence of rhythm, or rhythm of accountabilities and meetings. It's around dashboards and numbers. It's around vision and where you want to go. All those things matter when you're small like us, and it matters when you're a $200 million company as well, right? And you've got to have a plan in place. Otherwise, the business is just going to take you where it's going to go, and you're not going to be guiding it to where you need it to go.
Yeah. Effectiveness is the key word that comes up in my mind when I hear you talk about that, Scott, is everything, every meeting, where are those meetings ending up? Are we just talking about great things and we're not actually moving the needle? We're not making progress. What are the next steps, actions, right? And if you have that system, you are more effective, not only in the meetings, but post. You're able to, use your time more wisely and more effectively. So
how do you better inspect a business? It's like, you actually have to have a snapshot or a dashboard that helps you interrogate what's going on. And it's hard to ask good questions if you don't have good information. You can only stay surface level. And so, we always talk about spend more time talking about the reds instead of the greens. But a lot of times you don't know what the reds are, because everyone's trying to, human nature, everyone's trying to explain why they're not really red.
Yeah, avoid them.
Spin.
It's more yellow. Like, here's the 8 reasons why.
Here's why.
It's not really behind, but it's just like, if you don't have a clear way to measure, view, talk about these things, you're never going to be able to have hard conversations. You're never going to be able to, get to those aha moments that you talked about before of, oh, hey, we're going the wrong way. Like, let's turn left, not right.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things you said earlier when we were talking was this idea of it's not good enough just to know what the data's saying. Why is the data saying that, right? So digging a little bit deeper and really understanding the context behind the data, and not just, oh, well, here's what our numbers are over some period of time. And, that's where it comes down into having a good analyst, RevOps, data person, whoever that is, someone who can do more than just pull it all together and just say, okay, I can update the report once a week or once a month, but instead they dive in deeper and really understand the why behind what's being said there.
Yeah, I mean, like to hit on sort of from my perspective, what makes a great RevOps leader. I think like the best RevOps folks who've worked for me historically have been real pains in the butt. And what I mean by that is they don't just accept the status quo as the status quo. They ask why. They try to understand what's happening broadly in the business that's led to this ask that's being made of them. And as a result, they sharpen other people's questions and they get more precision around, okay, why are we actually doing this? Why am I creating this new report? Why is this a new slide in my monthly presentation? I don't understand. And it gets to a lot more productive conversations. The worst version of sales ops, RevOps, marketing ops, product marketing person, partnerships person, strategy person is the individual who's a little bit of the order taker and does, it's great to have people who are soldiers who are productive and getting things done. But ultimately that's like it's really not like they're not a compounder on your effectiveness. They're kind of a little bit linear in the way you think about your own leverage or productivity. They're only going to get as much done as you ask them to go do. And they will get done exactly what you tell them, not what you should have been asking, because you were moving too fast. And so when I think about the right spec, it's this individual who asks why 12 times. It's the person who doesn't just understand the individual ask, but understands the broader context for why the ask was made. And I think one other thing to sort of as a bit of a cliche, but it's like, stop, advice I would give to sales ops person is like, stop working on behalf of your boss and other people, your constituents, and start working on behalf of the business. Because like the only way you're going to be valuable over time, the only way you're going to get promoted and become, broader in your long-term vision of your career, if that's what you want to do, right? That doesn't have to be the answer, is if you are, if you're thinking about the business problems, not the problems of your boss who needs to solve XYZ issue.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I think even companies that are kind of early stage in their ops side of things, what we've observed is oftentimes they have kind of ad hoc ops happening. So they've got somebody on the marketing team who just has a bent towards processes and data, somebody on the sales team that's got those. But the ones that really seem to rise above the rest are the ones that, like you said, are asking the business questions and not just trying to solve their own individual challenges and trying to make their job easier, but they see an issue inside the business and say, how can I help solve that? And companies are usually, they've got somebody in there that starts to do that. And then they realize, wow, there's so much value that person's bringing. Why don't we actually look at turning this into a actual role within the organization that's 100% focused on it and that's focused on the entire go-to-market structure and not just their own siloed needs.
Yeah, I also think about the, to your point, what are we looking holistically, but, candidates often come into these roles and like you said, functional leaders are looking for all these different reports, right? Yeah, create this dashboard and this dashboard. But the great RevOps leader comes in and goes, what are the 3 to 5 things that we need to measure to show that this business is heading in the right direction, right? And not all these, it's the nice to have versus the must have. And I think companies oftentimes in a siloed setup land on that, their own metrics, their own long list of nice to have things, but really it needs to be a core set that shows, is this business heading in the right direction, period. And that's what the right level leader brings to the table. And it requires business IQ, right? It requires a certain level of EQ to be able to, negotiate those conversations, talk to those folks, and have higher level conversations. I think that's what we oftentimes look for in candidates is the ability to navigate those higher level relationships, the ability to push back and not avoid conflict. Conflict's so important in this role, right? You have to enter into conflict and not shy away from it. Not be a bull in a china shop, but be very diplomatic in that approach.
This is one of the coolest jobs that exists at a software company. Like, and if you don't think that, you probably shouldn't be doing the job, because it's one of the few roles at a company where you're working on the business in many cases, not in the business. So you're the mechanic that's working on the machine while everybody else is trying to make the machine move forward. And it's like it's you can sort of pick and choose and explore and find out where the break points are, and you get to be the one who identifies those through critical thinking and data introspection. And so I think it's, again, very commonly misunderstood that, I mean, you could be just the order taker for a CRO in the RevOps, example, or you could be a business partner, and ultimately you are the number two to the CRO, helping them think through how to run their business. Again, in the RevOps example, in the BizOps example, you can be the number two to the CEO and CFO, and you're trying to help them make better decisions and run their business accordingly.
So one last question that we want to kind of queue up here for you is, specifically because of your role in private equity, is I'd love to hear a couple of your thoughts on why you feel that this role, this BizOps, this RevOps, this whatever ops role, is so critical to private equity portfolio companies, to their future success. I know we've unpacked a little bit of it, but if we could define that in a couple of statements, I'd love to hear your thoughts there.
Maybe hitting on some of the things we've talked about, but maybe being more more specific or clear. It's RevOps leaders should be the intelligence leader for the CRO or CEO, which I just talked a little bit about. How do you make sure that CROs and CEOs spend the time that they understand the numbers? Because a lot of times they're operating on gut feel and road feel, so to speak, that they've acquired over a number of years running the business, growing the business. So they have preconceived notions about what the right decision should be. They're usually the right instincts, but data can inform changes to where the winds are blowing, and thus the decisions that should optimally be made. So this is the same point I talk about RevOps folks often managing the sort of function and not thinking about the business. Very similarly, CROs can end up managing, any real functional leader can end up managing their function, making sure it's working, and not really thinking about why it is they're doing it. So it's a really great RevOps person can elevate the decision making of the entire organization, and that's a really powerful capability that you get entrusted to go execute on.
Well, Scott, this has been a great conversation. We really appreciate you sharing your perspective, what you've observed and seen as you've been working with now a number of different portfolio companies. So thank you so much for being here. It's been great.
Well, can I ask some questions of you as well?
Yeah, please.
Go for it.
So how are you all seeing the evolution of the sort of RevOps org structure? So over time.
I think it's becoming more centralized. I think, the more that folks, and by that I mean, who does the role report into is becoming more and more important, right? I think we see two things oftentimes. We see, and this is where we try to push back in conversations, is this role is going to just report into a VP of sales. And we go, that's just a sales ops role, right? What we're saying is we need a higher reporting line for this role, back to your point of into the C-suite, because that's where decisions are being made. That's where that intelligence needs to go. right? And so that reporting line needs to go straight up there. So that's one of the things we've observed. And then thinking more holistically about the org structure, right? And allowing this person, what the reporting line does is it allows this person to go wider on the business, make more impact end to end, as opposed to just being go-to-market being intelligence for one part of that funnel, right? So now you're opening it up and you're going wider and you're saying, no, we need to give this person the ability to look at more than just sales. We need to give this person the ability to look at more than just marketing. We need to build out one end-to-end process, pre-sales all the way through post-sales and beyond, right? To your point, it goes into product, it goes into other parts, and engineering, finance. So I think that's what we're seeing is companies are starting to realize actually it benefits us if we let this person go at the entire business, as opposed to just putting them into one function. Anything else, Adam?
Yeah, I mean, I think that sums it up. I think the other thing that we're seeing is, this role was really, there was a lot of hiring happening in 21, 22. It's kind of going crazy, right? And then last year, things slowed down a good bit with the role. What we're seeing now as companies are beginning to hire again is that they're looking for someone that has a little more of that strategy component to them, that have maybe seen it happen and can share the practical ways that the organizations that they've worked inside of before have grown, have progressed. So they're seeing that. They're also realizing that this person, like you said, they really need to be sitting directly underneath either the CRO or the CEO, and they've got this dotted line connection to head of marketing, head of sales, head of customer success, and then this head of RevOps, all reporting directly up into the CRO role. And those are the folks that I feel like are utilizing that first individual contributor well. And then after that company really starts to scale beyond, they've usually got that head of revenue operations, whether that's a VP, director, and then they begin to build out a team underneath them that are focused. Many times they're focused on a specialty. So you've got an intelligence, a data individual, you've got a technology individual, you've got maybe kind of enablement underneath them. And so they begin to build out that team underneath them that are a little more specialized when that top person is more of the strategist, but a general strategist. Is that what you're seeing as well?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
100%. And maybe the most important question is, how did you guys make that sign behind you happen? Because it's spectacular.
Good friend.
Yeah.
Right.
We've got a buddy who has he's got a laser cutting and I mean, it looks just like us, right? We could actually not show up and just let the sound look like it's just coming out of those.
I like that idea. That should be in the next podcast.
That's right. That's right.
Well, can I ask one more question here? So, looking ahead into 2024, I'd love to just get your thought on this. What are you most excited about around go-to-market strategy, especially being within Bain and post-COVID, all these changes, right? A lot of companies moving way more focused on profitable growth, efficient growth now. What are you seeing going into 2024?
There's a couple things. So one is I think public SaaS comps are a good proxy for what's happening. You're starting to see in aggregate performance, like bookings performance, turn around. You can call it Q4, Q1, and so what was a moment of austerity is folks are sort of coming out of the darkness, so to speak, and there's a little bit more cautious optimism around our businesses generally. I think you talked about the profitable growth theme. I think it continues, and it goes back to a little bit more of where historically dollars were thrown on the pile. The question now is much more about, okay, what's that incremental headcount doing? Let's do an audit, zero-based budgeting process of who's doing what, and are there redundant skill sets? going back to the importance of centralized ops, this in a nutshell is sort of an outcome of this renewed focus on profitability and understanding what investments you're making and across the business, and finding a way to drag those costs out makes it more clear, where you need to cut and where you need to invest. So I think, like, broadly speaking, there's lots of optimism around 24 more broadly, lots of open questions around some of these broader macro trends. Talk about, obviously AI and how that has an implication from the bottom and from the top on the future of enterprise software, what that looks like. But generally speaking, I think everyone's quite optimistic.
Well, Scott, we enjoyed it. This was really fun. Thanks for being on with us, and maybe we can do it again another quarter this year. We'll come back and do another conversation, but we really appreciate you, and thanks for being on with us.
Yeah, thanks, Scott.
Absolutely. Happy to do it.
Awesome, man.
Good to
Thanks.
be with you guys.